Good evening, everyone, and welcome to City Hall. I'd like to welcome members of the public, but particularly members of the committee, but particularly members of the public who've turned out today. And we really appreciate you coming here and having your say in the corridors of power. So thanks very much for coming along. The emergency evacuation procedure, we don't have a planned alarm test, so if the fire alarm sounds, then please leave the room calmly by the lobby area and out the main front door of City Hall, turn right and walk down the ramp towards the cathedral, and the assembly point is in the space in front of the front door of the cathedral. So on to agenda item 2, apologies for absence and substitutions. Councillor Nick Coombs is going to be here today, but is subject to train timetables and is going to be a little bit late. We've received apologies from Councillor Emma Edwards, and we have Councillor Jenny Bartle substituting, and we have apologies received from Councillor Morris, and Councillor Mark Weston is substituting. I don't think there's any other apologies or substitutions. No. Does any of the committee members have any interests to declare? We'll take that as a no, and won't record any in the minutes. I'm going to move the minutes of the previous meeting of the committee held on the 12th of September as a correct record. Could I have someone to second that, please? Rob Breyer, thank you very much. Can you confirm the minutes as a correct record, and then I will sign them as a chair? Thank you. It was, Nick, just in time. We had an extraordinary number of votes in that meeting, so I'm glad that we got the minutes right. Agenda item 5, Chair's announcements. We have agreed as policy chairs that all officer decision notices which are signed off by policy chairs between committees will now be published. I believe that the link to that is on the agenda of this committee meeting. I think that's really important in terms of transparency. I'd like to say that all of the notices that I've signed off in the last, actually since taking on this role, have all been authorised, and it's just confirming that we're good to invest or spend the money or enter into a contract. If there's ever any emergency officer decision notices that we need to take, then I'll make sure that I just talk about those explicitly at this meeting. I'd also like to invite Councillor Tim Rippington. In the forward plan, we have made provision to have at every meeting feedback from our task and finish groups, and particularly the bus services one is moving at pace. I think we've been meeting every week, which has been quite a sprint, both a sprint and a marathon, actually, isn't it, Tim? It's feeling like at the moment. So would you like to just give us a little bit of feedback on that?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to say a big thank you to Pete Woodhouse and Sam Wilcock for the hard work and support they've given the task and finish group so far. I'm also very pleased to report we've had excellent support from the WECA officers who've attended every one of our meetings to date. I think that's really important to make sure that we're all working together on this. Councillor attendance has also been very good, given that, as I say, we've had 5 meetings already since 19th of September, which is a challenge for administration, if nothing else. As recognised at the outset, timescales to ensure we're in a position to start spending the £4.7 million of CAS funding on supported bus services from April 2025 are very tight. On Wednesday this week, we met with 4 of the main bus operators in the city to ensure they were aware of our objectives and timetable, and all were happy that they would be able to respond to the tender process within the timetable we've laid out for them, so that's good news. Prior to that, we've successfully identified our priorities for awarding new contracts for supported services, and just to run through these for people who aren't on the task and finish group, they are in no particular order. Services running to or passing through areas of significant population which currently have no or very infrequent services. Services which serve areas of high deprivation, services which connect popular destinations such as healthcare sites, education establishments, transport hubs, employment sites, retail, leisure and new developments, services which run through a livable neighbourhood, services providing orbital connectivity, which is a particularly interesting one because it was made clear to us at the meeting yesterday that that's something that bus operators do not foresee as being profitable at any time in the near future. Services which help to support the nighttime economy and services which would be more attractive to users with an improved frequency. So those are the things that we as a committee have deemed to be the parameters, if you like, that we will look at when determining which services we need to put out to tender. Obviously, always with the caveat, the amount of money is going to be nowhere near enough to cover all the services that we would like to be tendering for at this point in time. Finally, we've also contacted every councillor and a number of other interested parties and organisations for their thoughts on where the gaps are in our provision, and we had a very good response to that. And next week, we're hoping to look at initial proposals for routes or changes to existing services ahead of finalising the proposals which will go out to tender. So that's where we are today, Chair.
Thanks for that very succinct summary, Tim. I'd like to thank you and Sam for all the hard work you've been putting in to make this a success. And Pete, of course, Pete Woodhouse, and echo your thanks to everyone who's been involved. I think we're happy now to move on to the public forum. So we've got up to 30 minutes available for the public forum. So I'll just start the stopwatch now. Each questioner is permitted to ask up to 2 oral supplementary questions because the questions and replies, as well as statements, have been circulated to committee members and published on the website in advance of the meeting. A supplementary question must arise directly out of the original question or reply, so we can't have entirely fresh questions. We've had 11 public forum questions received for the meeting as follows. So firstly, Nicholas Davis has submitted 3, but I don't think he's here today. Next we have Martin Rands. Is Martin here today? No. So next is Councillor Tim Kent, whom I can see. So you've hopefully seen the answers to your questions and be interested in any follow-up answers. Questions?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick follow-up. Just to sort of point out that I think there was a factual mistake in one of the answers. It says banning the left-hand turn ban from Wells Road to West Town Lane. It was actually West Town Lane to Wells Road. That was the left-hand turn ban that was abandoned after the consultation, just to make sure that we make sure that's factually correct. Just one follow-up question, sort of to that, which is regarding the proposal we had made about banning vehicles from turning right out of Hengrove Lane. But also there is a proposal from the council about banning vehicles from turning right from Wells Road into West Town Lane. The alternate route given for that is Hengrove Avenue, which is a very small, very narrow residential road, which the figures here then show 800 cars extra a day would be forced onto that road, as that's the council's alternative route. So the follow-up question would be, so what consideration has been made regarding the negative impact on Hengrove Avenue residents? Thank you.
Can I invite Adam to answer that one, please?
So, just to clarify, it's the right turn ban from Wells Road into West Town Lane.
Yes, so it's regarding the right-hand turn ban from Wells Road onto West Town Lane, and the TRO gave the council's alternative route as being Hengrove Avenue.
Right. So we've had various discussions about this and about the right turn, which we will cover a bit more when we come to the FBC paper. We have committed to looking at additional mitigations in those surrounding roads, and particularly looking at a livable neighbourhood type review of the Stockwood area. Diversion routes are not always the route that everyone will take. It's the route that you will use for HGVs, which is not necessarily the route everyone will take, but we will be looking at those alternative. So we'll be looking at the alternative routes, which we've committed to doing, so and what mitigations we can put in. And we've also had some further discussions on the right turn ban itself as well.
As I think I technically have another supplementary. Can I just come back to point out that I think there is a 7.5 tonne weight limit at the top of Hengrove Avenue. Plus also I don't think a HGV will probably fit through there, mostly during the day. So perhaps that could be reconsidered. And just finally to point out Hengrove Avenue it's not actually in Stockwood, but in Hengrove. Thanks.
That wasn't really a question, was it?
Within there that you may find a question. Well hidden.
I think there are questions that we need to answer in terms of the impact on Stockwood, and we'll get onto that when we get to the substantive item. Next up is David Redgewell. So David, you've had answers to your 3 questions.
Can they push them up so I can just catch which one was first?
And so you have 2 supplementary questions. I think you're making a statement later on, so can we make sure these are actually questions, David?
Yeah, I'm going to ask the first one, see which one I've got. Yeah, so, hello, can you hear me?
No, speaking to that one second.
Okay, so I suppose my question is, on the coach proposals, bearing in mind that we've always struggled with coach facilities in Bristol, even though we're the hub of the National Express network and the hub of we will actually see an awful lot of tourist coaches in the next few weeks as the Christmas markets come. So what work is actually being carried out? We did have a legal agreement, which people now possibly forget about, for the redevelopment of Broadmead, which meant we would bring the coach station back into use at Newfoundland Road. I've got that legal agreement. So it's a bit vague. What work is actually going on in looking at both scheduled coach services and tourist coach services as a result of demolition and redevelopment of Broadmead? Because you will displace those coaches. Thank you.
I'm going to ask Adam to answer that one as well, if you can. But I would like to say that I think Flixbus have now moved into the coach station, haven't they?
Yeah, that's fine. It's all I believe when they demolish, we will have problems with Megabus and Vulcan and all those coaches that are still on the
It's an ongoing issue as to where we can find enough space for coach parking and coach stops. So we are looking at it on a continuous basis. We did consider it as part of the city centre project as to where we could find additional spaces. But yeah, it's an ongoing challenge. Coach travel is a very popular form of travel and a very important form of travel as well. I can't give a kind of answer as to what the solution is to it. It's not easy to find space for coaches. When we identify a space, there aren't big open spaces in the city centre that people want to turn into coach parks and not other things. So it's quite a challenging issue to resolve.
Do you have another question, Dave?
It's working. So my other question is on the ferries, and I was trying to understand this with Weka this morning. I know you've got a new harbour committee, so maybe you're going to put it there, but it looks to me at the moment that the ferry services, which are important and which Councillor Rippington has done a huge amount of work on, which I can bash him on, to keep those ferries running and extend them to Netham. But there doesn't appear to be one authority really picking up responsibility for that service. This morning I spoke to Weka officers. There is a need to make the boats fully accessible. They're never going to be commercial services. This is not Stena Line in Bristol Docks or Bristol Harbour. But all I'm asking today clearly is, can you identify which department of the council will take, besides the Harbour Master, will take responsibility for the Harbour Ferry services? If we re-tender and if we put out new services as part of Western Harbour Extension, which I welcome, absolutely we all welcome, how will we take responsibility for procurement and delivering those services? Bearing in mind, the only time those ferries are probably commercial is in the tourist season in the summer, but we do run them at other times as well. So I just ask that we clarify with WECA, and WECA's put funds in as well, with Tim, who's responsible for the ferry service and how we're going to actually modernise the boats, the wharves, through CRTRS. Because even Temple Meads, Ed, the ferry terminal is not accessible. So
I'm going to say I'll take that away and discuss it with both the Combined Authority and with other policy committee chairs. I, for one, would like to see much more progress on mobility as a service and integrated ticketing. And I think it seems to have been around the corner for about 8 years now, so I'd like to see, I don't know where that noise is coming from, maybe me. For about 8 years now, mobility as a service seems to have been just around the corner, and we appear to be letting the best be the enemy of the good on that. So in terms of the original question, I think we do need to look at how we try and get one single platform for all forms of ticketing in the West of England area, even if it's not integrated ticketing. That would be a good start.
and the other is the access to, so I would say sustainable presence, how we get disabled access back on the boats and the walls. We did that before.
Whoever takes responsibility for this, and it may end up being this committee, will have that in their sight. So make sure that we minute that I need to have that conversation with other policy committee chairs. Thank you. Somewhere there's a microphone making noises. Never mind. So that, I think, concludes our questions. So I'm going to move on to public statements. Martin Rand's not here still. No. Peter Nichols. In which case we're on to Councillor Weston. So you're in the unusual position of making a statement whilst sitting in a committee chair. Thank you, Mark.
Good times. I always enjoy embracing the unusual. So my statement's before you. You can read it at leisure. It's a wonderful piece of prose. It's about the A418 bus lanes about to be installed on it in a colossal act of self-harm, but you're still going to go ahead and do it. I realise that this is a Hail Mary. There's still time to pull back on it. You're going to artificially create congestion, and you're going to turn the A418 into pretty much the Bath Road coming out of Bristol, and it's just going to be chock-a-block all the time. And we intentionally are going to do that. But one of the things I really want to highlight now, when we were going on with all this traffic vandalism, the original plan that came up and was brought in had traffic calming measures on Brentry Lane. And the reason is because Crow Lane roundabout sits in the middle. Goes north to south, and Knoll Lane, Crow Lane goes east to west. Brentry Lane cuts out to the roundabout. Now, it doesn't take a genius to realise they're not going to go to the roundabout, sit in the traffic. They're going to go down Brentry Lane and cut out of it. And the traffic calming's been removed. Apparently, because rat running won't happen. I can only assume we'll be riding our flying pigs to work when this doesn't happen. The traffic calming, at the very least, has to go back in, otherwise you're creating a drag strip. And this was acknowledged with the original proposal, and we ditched it in this last ridiculous idea. So before we decide to pour concrete over the road and all the rest of the damage we're going to do, could we at least have a modicum of sense and put the traffic calming measures back in so you don't create a drag strip? Thank you.
Mark, I'd like to thank you for taking me around the area and educating me about it. I'm sorry that I think it may have just been a little bit too late in the whole process to... I don't want to start invoking Hail Marys, but I think it may have been just a little bit late in the process for me to be able to act on that education.
I mean, on that, we have been trying the Hail Mary passes since 2019 when this last came up. And actually, the original proposal was also opposed by the Labour MP as well at the time. This does not have support, but it's going to go ahead. But please put the traffic calming back in.
Thanks, Mark. Suzanne, I can see you're here, so please speak.
Thank you. So I'm representing Teresa Tottenham residents tonight, and we're pleased to see the recommendation to delay changes to the Belville Road junction. And so we're pleased to see that recommendation for delaying at this stage. The number 2 bus route consultation focused on the bus timetables and delayed, and we're not convinced that that junction is a major cause of delays. My statement was about the importance of accurately recording public contributions. I don't think that's been done, unfortunately, in one of the reports. But I can see now there's also a road safety issue that's very important. And so I've been looking into that and pulled out more recent data than is being used. And actually I didn't realise we'd been in a big chamber, so I bought a little map to give you all, but you can all look it up yourself. But all along Wells Road there are problems with road safety. So we're really pleased that the South Bristol livable neighbourhood, we might be able to address that whole route to make sure that we're encompassing the different points along that road. And in that sense, the Bellevue Road Junction isn't worse than a couple of others. So just to say thank you for that recommendation, and we really want to work with the officers and with the councillors to get the best possible outcome for that. Thank you.
Thanks, Suzanne, and we'll be debating that later on. I think if you look at the full business case, there's a shocking number of red marks or yellow marks to denote people having been hurt on the Wells Road, right along the Wells Road. So yes, it is quite a systemic problem. Thank you. Next we have Jonathan Hucker.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've not seen the results of the TRO consultation, and I'm surprised that the committee are expected to make a decision on this, on such an important project, without seeing those results. I'm assuming that the committee haven't seen the results of the TRO consultation. The statement that I put in is quite detailed, but there's just a couple of key points that I would like to highlight. I'm pleased that the proposed bus lanes will no longer be 24-hour. I think that 24-hour bus lanes south of West Town Lane makes no sense at all. So those have been reduced to 12-hour. I think that 12-hour bus lanes south of West Town Lane is complete overkill, really, because the number 2 bus doesn't go along that stretch of road. It turns off and goes along West Town Lane. But the buses that go along the Wells Road south of the West Town Lane junction are few and far between, mainly country buses. So I think that I'm not convinced that there's a need for bus lanes at all along there. I would prefer it if there weren't any bus lanes, but if bus lanes are to go in, then they should certainly be peak time only and not 12-hour. I've had a huge number of people contact me about the banning of the right-hand turn from Wells Road into West Town Lane. There is a great strength of feeling about this amongst local residents. I'm convinced that a lot of motorists will turn off earlier and go down relatively narrow residential roads like David's Road, Kinsale Road, Imperial Road, Mowbray Road, Beryl Grove, Hazelbury Road. They'll sort of access West Town Lane that way if they can turn right at the junction with Wells Road. And I think that will put a great deal of pressure on those roads. And I think there's real sort of road safety, real concerns around road safety with regard to that. And I can honestly say that of all the people that I've spoken to over the last 3 years, nobody has said to me that they think that banning that right-hand turn into West Town Lane is a good idea. Thanks.
Thanks, Jonathan. Noted, and I hope you'll be able to stay on for the when we discuss this as a committee. Next up, I have Gordon Hodgson.
Thank you. I live in...
If you could use the microphone, it just helps.
Thank you. I live in 22 Davids Road, off the Wells Road. I wish it to be recorded that the proposals are neither in my interest nor my safety, and wish them to be rejected and not proceed further. I've been a cyclist for over 70 years, and I've lived in the Stockwood ward of the city for over 55 years. I regularly cycled to work in the city centre for most of 30 years, and continued to cycle on the roads affected by your proposals since retirement 15 years ago. Your premise that you wish to increase cycling from the current 1% of traffic to 5% is ambitious, but does not take into account local topography or road conditions. Everywhere looks flat on a map, and the roads often look wider. Cyclists choose to use alternative routes to commute rather than congested and polluted main roads. As advised previously, the existing reserved cycleways on the Wells Road are safer than the dedicated bus lanes. Your proposal to prevent traffic turning right at the northbound junction of the Wells Road into West Town Lane will increase traffic on narrow side roads, making it more dangerous for cyclists using those side roads. The proposal to have a segregated cycle track at the northern end of Sturminster Road needs further clarification and would be welcome for safer cycling, but may be hazardous for pedestrians and a nuisance for residents on Sturminster Road. Have the committee taken into account the proposals by Baines Local Authority to introduce a 20-mile-an-hour limit on the Wells Road from the viaduct to Woolard Lane? This will increase congestion and pollution during peak hours when parents and children are walking to and from school, and will be exacerbated by your proposals. May I suggest, before any decision is made to proceed further, councillors and council officials spend time cycling in the locality. I'd be willing to accompany them and even loan them a bike. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Gordon. And we've noted your statement. Thank you. Next, David Ridgewell. Dave, the recommendation I have is to allow people to speak for no more than a minute. I've been quite indulgent to many people, but I am going to be quite strict in terms of timing with you, Dave, because you've already more or less had a statement as part of your question.
I'll summarise where I stand. Just to cast your record back to that's 5 feet power. We support the principles of the work that's going on in the city. Just want to make sure there is community consultation in those areas, and we also have the areas that are real deep social deprivation without buses, South Bristol, Brislington, areas around Southmead, and areas across East Bristol. So the bus network's been cut, and we really do need to putting buses back into operation. There's some huge gaps, and it doesn't take a lot of geography to work out where people don't have a single bus service at all, including parts of Whitchurch, where Tim is. So that's the premise we suggest, but we also suggest to make it easy is to try and add on to existing first group services rather than go through lots of tendering process, because the money will soon get further doing that. On bus lanes, 24-hour bus lanes, well, that'd be one thing. But the Wells Road has an intensive service to Taunton, Yeovil, Midsummer North, Wells, Glastonbury Street, and it's a key corridor you and I communicate about it quite a few times about blocking it for buses. That's the main cultural route. There is quite a major bus flow through there, and actually it's not 1 or 2 country buses, the bus every 20 minutes going out to countryside and serve Baines. So all I'd ask are the bus lanes that were proposed today, so they are only 12 hour, we've got no night services there yet. They go in, and I would recommend all the bus lanes go in today. We need more bus lanes, but also we need to change the areas where we have no bus services. Happy to work. When I've been in touch, feeling for the committee, but really for you as a social deprivation, please don't waste lots of money on night buses, hop on Friday and Saturday night and then leave it.
Very succinct, Dave. And the group will be noting the task and finish group have noticed your submission, so thank you for that. And I would like to say that bus lanes, despite one of the other statements or questions that we've had today, do make a difference. The bus companies made that very clear to us in the task and finish group, and we really hope to be able to stimulate the market by making it easier to run buses. I think Tim Rippington's also completely right that the money we do have to support bus services is going to go nowhere near serving all those communities that are no longer served by buses, and it's a real problem for us.
It was deliberative.
That was a complete accident. Would you like to... I do think it's one of those mobile mics that's making the noise. Tim, I apologise. Would you like to make your statement?
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll try to keep it brief. I'm sure you have all read my statement and you would have seen the answers to the questions. We strongly support safe pedestrian crossing at the Hengrove Lane, West Town Lane junction on the Wells Road. But it's essential that this complex junction works for all users, that we reduce down any negative impacts of change. That is all that we seek today as the local councillors. Do you think that 800 vehicles a day should be redirected onto a small, narrow residential road? A road, by the way, that is totally unsuitable for larger vehicles. I'm sure you don't. Do you believe that to save less than 60 seconds, a 12-hour bus lane should be imposed on both sides of Wells Road, resulting in reducing safety outside of 3 local schools and a park due to increased parking and additional traffic movements near them? I'm sure you don't. Do you think that a new junction scheme should lock in dangerous turns that the local councils have lobbied to actually have removed? I'm sure you don't. So I'm sure actually in the main that we agree. And as local councils, we wish to put forward a reasonable proposal. That today you instruct the officers in charge of this project to sit down with the local councillors, agree with us improvements to the proposals that will enshrine the objectives, safer crossings and modal shift, bus priority where necessary, and a scheme that ensures safety first. We are here and willing to do this and work quickly with the officers and the chair of the committee that new proposals could be brought back to you that are agreed. We presented detailed evidence and suggestions to officers over 2 years ago on this, but those have been ignored. But we make this offer again, and we are willing to work at speed to ensure this happens. To go ahead with this scheme as it is will be simply to waste taxpayers' money on solutions that fail to meet local need or citywide need. We don't need a white elephant scheme that actually makes our local streets more dangerous. We need a scheme that works for everybody, and that's what we would like to see agreed today. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Tim. Adam's indicating he wants to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify in relation to the earlier question. You were talking about the right turn from Wells Road to West Town Lane. That's where the 800 vehicles are. The right turn from Wells Road to Hengrove Lane is a much lower number. Because the question was about...
Sorry, we support that ban.
Right.
Yeah, so it's only one, the other one we support, and we propose a third that's
The
been
Hengrove Avenue is the diversion route for that right turn, not the other right turn.
Hengrove Avenue is the diversionary route for the ban on turning from Wells Road into West Town Lane. So the diversionary route is to continue to drive down Wells Road, turn left onto Airport Road, turn left onto Hengrove Avenue, and turn left onto Hengrove Lane.
Before we do a tour of the whole of South Bristol, and I appreciate that is quite a long diversionary route, that it does very clearly state in the report that we'll be looking to make sure, well, we're going to have a debate, but it does say in the report that we'll be looking to spend the next couple of years working with local councillors, or it doesn't say local council, it does say that we'll be looking to mitigate the impacts and think about proposals to do better traffic calming throughout the neighbourhood. So yes, you've got a commitment there to look at mitigating some of the impacts of these proposals, and I hope you'll stay for the debate. I'm going to move on now to, I'm just going to call out the names of people that I don't believe are here, but just make sure. So Andrew Bessel, Mike Henahan, Cindy Govard, Ian Pond, Margaret Luton, Rose Perrett, Jacqueline Bishop, Katie Bennett, John and Carol Stafford, Elaine Hoskin, and I believe Emma Chamberlain is here today. Emma, hi.
Hello everyone. I actually live on the other side of the Wells Road, so I live in Long Eaton Drive. I'll read my statement as it is because I think it's quite important to hear from the people that live in the area you're speaking about. I object to the proposals in relation to the CRSTS strategic corridors on the A37 Wells Road.
Emma, your statement's quite long.
Yeah.
The committee will have read it.
I'm sure you've read it because I made a special...
I've certainly read every word of it. I've read every word of everything. We've got about 3 minutes left in this public forum. We've got at least one other person, possibly 2 other people who'd like to speak. So
I'd like to speak, please, so I'd like to read this out.
I would ask you to try and keep it to a couple of minutes and maybe not read the entire statement but summarise the key points.
I don't find that acceptable. So do you want me to read it?
I think if you read it all, it would take us to right to the end and then other people wouldn't have a chance to speak. So I'd prefer it if you could kind of summarise the main points, please.
I thought as a member of the public I was allowed to come and speak and read my statement, and that's what I was invited to do.
The guidance I have is that most people should limit their statements to 1 minute. Because we haven't had a huge number of people come today, I've been quite indulgent, but let's get on with it. If you could try and summarise it, that would be helpful, please.
Okay. I object to the introduction of the 12-hour bus lanes on the West Ham Lane to Gilder Parade, and I object to the bans on the 2 right turns to West Ham Lane and Hengrove Lane respectively. The bus lanes are not going to improve, they don't involve any major congestion spots at the moment, and they don't interface with any signalised junctions, as you point out in your FCP. Therefore, your rationale for introducing them is actually non-existent. There is already a dedicated cycle lane in exactly the place where you want to put the bus lane, so there is absolutely no uptick in cycling as you claim. The timetable buses run without congestion. Your data shows good punctuality on the outbound route. Lower punctuality is not going to be improved by bus lanes. It's actually a result of them being country services coming in from Bath, Taunton, Street and Wells. I disagree with your assumption that it will improve bus patronage. There's absolutely nothing changing. Nor can I believe the annual benefit of just under 3 minutes per passenger saved in time equates to a £6.1 million spend. I'm sure if you ask bus passengers if they noticed a 3-minute improvement, that would be irrelevant. But if they were asked about how 6.1 million were being spent, they might have a view. You say your changes are to make life better for residents, but the proposed bus lane will actually make life worse. The 12-hour parking restrictions will force cars into other residential streets. You say that your business case has been scaled back from 24 hours to 12, but the objections about parking remain. So even though you're changing the restriction, why is it acceptable to move from 24 to 12 and then not down any further? Furthermore, the proposal for a 12-hour restriction is not aligned with the other bus lanes on the wider part of the A37 that only operate during peak hours. Why does a quieter stretch of road need more harsher restrictions? And equally, I would agree with the councillor over there, it isn't needed at all. The lanes cannot run the whole stretch of the plan, and I would even say, having just driven up there today, they're actually not wide enough to put in a bus lane and a car. You would have the introduction would cause a bottleneck at the A37 New Fossway junction, because you would have traffic turning across, and you actually remove a 2-lane road use at the moment to just a single road use. and that will cause rat runs via Davies Road and Woodley Gardens. With regard to the bans on the A37 into West Ham Lane and Haygrove Lane, I feel that this is poorly considered and should be rejected. The accident data you present on pages 32 and 33 shows only 3 accidents in the last 6-7 years, and they are classed as slight. So that seems like an overreaction. Nobody wants accidents, I accept that. But with that level of accidents on that junction, it seems quite an excessive situation. I would expect to see modelling of the impact of the right turn ban, which I don't. People within the council here have obviously seen some subsequent data regarding the impact and the modelling, which I haven't been party to, I'm sorry. But I would have thought before a decision can be made on anything here, you actually have to see the modelling. I'm sorry I'm going on, but I'm going on. In my opinion, there has been no sound understanding of the alternative routes the traffic will take or the impact of the volume of cars impacting the roads and residents. And I think there's a strong chance of rat runs, you've got children's play parks, you've got schools, both potential accident spots. When I've looked at the traffic count data, it surprises me that some of this data is 10 years out of date. And one of the lines in Hazelbury Road looks particularly skewed. I can't believe that's correct. I haven't seen any data covering the other side of the road, of the A37, covering Hengrove Lane, Hengrove Avenue, Longington Drive and Pethersham Road. And they're all likely to be impacted by those junction changes. And I can't see how a decision can be made without the full traffic and understanding of the full traffic currently and the impact. I think a better solution can be found in terms of actual signalling and allowing a filter at these right turns. And I'm also at a loss to understand why this is being presented for approval when the councillors who've spoken here this evening has obviously rejected the plans and you don't appear to be listening. So in conclusion, I don't agree that you have a strong strategic business case. This is good value for money. I consider there's a danger of wasting 6.1 grant. I accept it's not council money, that you're obviously getting it from somewhere else. But I think it's just an excuse to say that you're improving infrastructure. And I think there should be better assessment, so I object. And I have to say, I don't really like the fact that I was rushed to do that when I've made the time to get here today.
And I was about to say thank you very much for coming in, taking the time to make such a thorough statement, and for coming in today. And I have given you, I think you've done a very good job of making the statement more succinct. So I thank you, and thank you for the time and trouble that you've taken to come in today. I'm going to move on. Is Gary Byard here? So Brendan Taylor?
No, there's most stuff on the train signal.
Right. And I don't think, is there anyone else here that is expecting to make a statement who hasn't yet spoken? Okay, in which case I apologise to Emma for rushing you, because I conclude the public forum now. We're going to move on to agenda item 7, extend the value of the Highways Defect Response and Emergency Works team. The purpose of this report is to seek approval from an extension in the value of Highways Defect Response and Emergency Works term contract. It's a key decision as it affects over £500,000 of spend and impacts more than 2 wards. I'm going to invite Sean, Head of Highways, to introduce and outline the key features of the report.
Thank you, Chair. So just to clarify, this isn't agreeing to budget spend, this is contract spend, so this is allowing us to write orders to get works done. I will say that the uplift is quite sizable, but that's because we've tried to put quite a bit of contingency in because we still have a winter to go, and you know there could be something wrong. We don't expect to spend anywhere near that through this contract, even though it's not approval of spend today, it is contract spend. Basically, the reasons why we've come to that limit is it's been an 8-year contract, and 8 years ago we had to make a decision on what we believed was going to be spent through that contract at that time, so it was an estimate at that time. Since then, we've obviously had quite a long COVID, high inflation. We've also, that contract, we've allowed other departments to use within the council to save them procuring similar services to try and reduce resources and costs into other departments. So basically, we've spent up the contract value earlier than anticipated 8 years ago for various reasons like COVID, high inflation, other departments using it. Obviously, the asset is always a challenge, and those councillors who I presented to recently understand the challenges around the asset, and obviously that has increased our spend through this contract as well. So what we're here today is just to ask for the extension of the spend of the contract so that we can continue to write orders as this contract does deliver our statutory duties, i.e. pothole repairs, defect repairs, emergency cover, 24/7, 365, all those types of services which we have to ultimately deliver as our statutory duty for the authority. I think that covers it. There's, like I said, there's lots of contingency in it, but that's because we've got a winter to go and you never know, if you see what I mean.
And it's quite a binding contract on the contractor as well, who's not able to turn anything down, are they?
Yes, they cannot turn work down, and like I said, they help with the contract covers if we need help with civil contingencies, all sorts of things. So it basically makes them commit to the work, and obviously it's been useful for other departments like parks, housing, docks to repair potholes and safety defects around other types of assets in the city.
Thanks, Sean. Have we got any, does anyone want to ask any questions of Sean? David.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Sean, for your report. I'm interested in about how we actually measure success in terms of the potholes. I'd like to know some information about how many times we have to revisit individual potholes to refill them when they have been filled in already, and also the average time it takes to actually fill a pothole from a member of the public reporting that pothole, please.
In relation to the number of times returns, I wouldn't have that data directly in front of me. Councillor Wilcox, apologies, but it's not great, it's not huge numbers. Nick and my colleague here may be able to help me in a second, but the contract runs well. I mean, if you look at the data where we look at, so we can understand we've got KPIs within the data, there's a 10-day response, but with all types of this type of defect, it's all done by well-managed highways guidance, which is kind of like the highway code to the legislation, which we have to comply with, which we have to defend in court and so on and so forth. That is a risk-based approach. So each officer, or when we get a public inquiry comes in, decides on the risk of that pothole, i.e. a pothole at the back of the footway next to a lamppost isn't as risky as one right in the middle of the footpath, as an example. So, you know, there is a risk-based approach to every defect which is undertaken. We have 24 hours, so something which is really, really desperately dangerous, or we have 10 days response, which is in line with most authorities across, or if it's more planned, 28 days. But they also have the ability to undertake temporary if it needs traffic management, more planning. So if the pothole was in the middle of a really busy junction in the city, so that we don't close that junction down for hours, we would go in and do a temporary repair and then return in a more planned way, maybe on an evening or something of that nature, just to remove the safety aspect. Sorry, could you just remind me, there's 3 bits to your question?
I think there was only 2, but I'd like to ask a follow-up if that's possible. I understand that you're going to be procuring a new contract for pothole repairs. What lessons have you learned from this contract that you'd like to apply to the new one, please?
So that tender is literally due to go out any day. Nick, can you help me with where we've changed it, because you're the one who's written the spec mainly?
Yeah, of course. So new contract's due to go out in December. Where we've looked at learning lessons is we've done a full review of the specification. We've brought our specification in line with national and local guidance about quality of workmanship, repairs, material temperatures, etc. We've significantly increased the number of KPIs that we will report on. there's also requirements for the contractor to be local, where they weren't before, even though our incumbent is a local supplier. In terms of lessons learnt, a lot of them around how we can work efficiently within the network. So we have quite tight with turnaround times. When your question was from time of reporting to repair, our contractual timescales are 10 days, so from instruction from an officer, and we try to turn around our inquiries within 24 hours. So we do try and turn around all defects within a month, within those 10 days, but the code of practice Sean referred to requires sort of 28 days as best practice. So we're well within that. And that's something that has worked well, but at times of high peak, it has gone outside of those 10 days. And we start to get duplications where we're reporting the same defect to the contractor, and that causes inefficiencies. So that's one of the key areas we're looking to see, to make sure the contractor has adequate back office resources to help us and them adequately work around the city efficiently, because it is a busy city, and trying to get from Hengrove to Stockwood to Avonmouth repairing defects can be challenging.
One more quick one, and you'll still be using Fix My Street as the main method of actually the public reporting stuff?
Currently, yes, we're in contract with Fix My Street. That doesn't form part of this contract. That's a separate IT contract, but at some point it will come up for consideration, and we will obviously look at suppliers and look at the market at that point in time.
I do think that Fix My Street, we need to be clear that it's both a communication tool and a KPI tool, and sometimes that does rub up against one another.
So what happens with Fix My Street is it comes into our asset system. So officers don't actually use Fix My Street, it's more of a public reporting tool, but there's an interface between our asset system which brings that information straight into our asset system. I mean, it's quite simple. It will come through, the officers will look at it and they can allocate jobs. So it's quite efficient. They can be literally out in Avonmouth and an inquiry arrive, and it could be round the corner, and they can literally see it coming up on their handhelds and what have you. So it's quite an efficient system in relation to bringing that data to the person remotely on the network.
I think there's been a process improvement that it doesn't no longer says something's closed when actually it's been reported for repairs, and I think that's been an improvement in the communication, probably stopped duplicate things coming in. So well done on that front, just to make things clearer.
Just to add as well, that in reason we believe why we've gone with the same type of contract, even though we've made improvements through it, is through our neighbours and through reports and audit report, we're actually been seen to be doing very well. We'd actually quite a lot less funding some of our near neighbours, and when I say near neighbours I mean Liverpool, Sheffield, other cities, I don't mean Baines and so on. And our NHT survey, which is a public survey, which is not something which we as officers were actually voted quite well as undertaking this. So that would all indicate that our process, what we have in the background and our delivery is going well, because we're getting those sort of data from different sources, if you see what I mean, not our own sources.
Thanks, Sean. Tim?
Yeah, thanks. No surprise that we're in favour of fixing potholes. Just wondered, Sean, what the impact of climate change has been on the, the volume of work that you're having to do within this contract. I appreciate it's a bit of a finger in the air, but are you seeing, more and more work having to be done than was the case, say, 10 years ago on the same road surfaces?
Yes, is the answer to that. That's why I'm keen to get things like the tree canopy going in the city and to protect roads, because that actually will help from the climate change to stop the heat impact and the weather impact. So yes, we are seeing an increase. We've actually increased our surface stressing and our preventative maintenance approach to try and battle it, because I'm very much a fan of prevention's better than cure, because repairing potholes for what it brings is very expensive, when I can spend £1 or £2 or £3 doing a square metre of surface dressing. So we actually undertake 300,000 square metres in the city now to try and combat potholes coming before they actually occur. But it's a constant battle, and the climate is not helping.
I don't see anyone else indicating they want to ask any questions, so I'm going to suggest that we move towards a vote on this for the clarity of the committee and for the benefit of the members of the public that are here present. I'm not going to read out the full recommendation, that's on the screen, but it's effectively to authorise us to extend this contract by up to £3 million and to invoke any subsequent extensions or variations specifically defined in the contract up to the maximum budget amount. I'm going to propose that we accept this report and the recommendations. Would someone like to second it? Thank you, David. So seconded by David Wilcox. Can we just put up hands to show if we're voting in favour of this? I was asked after 22 votes in the last committee to go round and say who's voting in favour and who's not, but in this time I'm just going to say that it's carried unanimously and every single person is in favour of that, so thank you. I don't see a need to ask if there's anyone against or any abstentions, so that vote is carried. And shall we move on? So we're now here for the, and thank you to Sean and Nick, and we'll see you at the next committee meeting. We're now moving on to the CRS Strategic Corridors report, which I'm sure a number of the people here will be very interested in. This seeks approval of the full business case for the CRSTS Strategic Corridors southern section and submission to WECA following a successful decision to commence a tendering process for civils contractors. It's a key decision as it impacts more than 2 wards. I'm going to invite Adam, Head of City Transport, to introduce and outline the report.
Is there any chance of the font being better? It's just impossible to read.
Make the font a little bit bigger on the screen.
Hi, yeah, so this report is seeking approval of the full business case. I think it's important to be clear, as the report does, that any of the proposals are then subject to the statutory consultation outcomes, so the TRO process. So through approving the FBC, you do not formally approve band terms, bus lanes, etc. That is approved through the statutory process, and we can't kind of harm that process, if you like. So the scheme proposes a number of interventions along the A37, starting from the centre. It's closure of Bellevue Road. We have highlighted that the proposal is not to take that forward following consultation and to consider that as part of the wider South Bristol Livable Neighbourhood scheme. Then straight across crossing at the St John's Lane junction, pedestrian crossings at the West Town Lane, Wells Road junction, the 2 right turn bands which have already been discussed. And then in West Town Lane, Sturminster Road, a segregated cycle track, relocation of the bus stop, various crossings and other changes in that area. The bus lanes from A37 Wells Road, West Town Lane, both directions to Gilder Parade, which are 12-hour bus lanes. And there have been some additional interventions following requests from local councillors, largely additional crossings in and around the Stockwood area, and a variety of changes proposed there as well. So the purpose of the scheme obviously is to improve sustainable transport options along that corridor. That does mean making some difficult choices, as is the case with all over the city. The recommendations in the report are to approve the submission of the full business case to the West of England Combined Authority and to authorise the Executive Director of Growth and Regen in consultation with the committee chair to take all steps required to accept the spend, tender and procure the contracts and award the contracts as set out in the full business case up to £6.1 million. So those are the recommendations. We have had some further thoughts and discussions around mitigations in the Stockwood area. So as part of the movement plan that we're developing, we're looking at what livable neighbourhoods might look like on a more citywide basis. So one of the proposals is that we need a kind of a further out neighbourhood to assess what a livable neighbourhood might look in that sort of area. So Stockwood is an ideal opportunity to look at an area that's further out and understand what changes a livable neighbourhood might enable there, so that if we're looking at mitigating the impacts of a scheme like this, how would that fit with the livable neighbourhood approach? And we've also obviously been considering a West Town Lane junction. Do you want me to go into detail on it? Yeah, so we've looked at the right turn ban has been subject to the most issues, which is the right turn ban from Wells Road into West Town Lane. The reason that ban was proposed was two reasons, which was road safety, in that it's not generally particularly safe having a right turn across two lanes of traffic coming in the other direction, and also capacity, because putting in an all-round pedestrian stage at the junction reduces capacity, and by taking out the right turns, you can ensure that both the ahead lanes are acting as ahead lanes rather than being blocked by right turning traffic. Now, another consideration we've given is the design of the junction doesn't enforce that right turn. You can't really enforce it through the design. So a further option would be to essentially approve the FBC, take forward the junction design as it is, without banning the right turn. That right turn, we would retain the other right turn ban, which hasn't been subject to many issues. The net result of that would likely be reduced congestion on that approach. Now, that approach is generally, the capacity is defined by the Airport Road, Wells Road junction. So reducing the capacity in the modelling looks like it may be a problem. It would depend how often the pedestrian crossing came in. But we could implement the junction without implementing the right turn ban at that point in time, monitor how it's working, and then at the same time we might be looking at the alternative proposals for how a livable neighbourhood might work in the Stockwood area, for example, which might say actually it's a good idea to have that right turn. So we can do a more comprehensive piece of work whilst we are still continuing with the project and delivering the junction upgrade. It wouldn't require very much work at all to implement the right turn ban at a later stage. It's a couple of extra heads that you'd put on the signal pole and an extra bit of detection, which would not cost a significant amount of money. So that's, if you like, an alternative approach we could take, which would deal with a lot of concerns being raised about the right turn ban. We'd still retain the pedestrian crossings, which we think are really fundamental and important to the local area, and would give us further opportunity to look at the area in a more holistic way, which really we haven't had opportunity to as part of the project. So I think would maybe give us a better kind of long-term view of what the area could look like. So that's an option that we thought we could suggest here at committee. It wouldn't significantly change the business case, so we don't think it affects the decision you're making in terms of approving the business case. As I said previously, any TROs, i.e. band turns, bus lanes, etc., are subject to statutory process anyway. So the business case is not particularly reliant on that right turn, so it doesn't significantly change the benefits, etc., but would be responding to the issues that have been raised and perhaps give us more opportunity to look at those wider issues. Just a point to note, obviously we are under significant time pressures in terms of the CRSDS programme and moving projects forward to ensure they get delivered. Whilst this one isn't up against the kind of end date of CRSDS in March 2027, the more projects we can deliver more quickly, if you like, de-risks the programme as a whole.
So just to be absolutely clear, one of the most controversial aspects of this, which is the ban right turn from the Wells Road heading northbound right into West Town Lane, is something that we don't have to enact. The engineering can carry on, and if it causes a problem, it's very quick, relatively quick and quite simple and inexpensive then to respond to that. So I know that doesn't cover all of the concerns expressed in the statements that we've had, and in the we haven't seen the TRO report yet, but hopefully that's an example of actually listening and trying to make some proposals and mitigate the effects on places like Mowbray Road and some of the other side roads. And I think I really need to emphasise, and I've noticed a couple of hands go up, but I really need to emphasise that all of this is subject to the TRO process. We are moving at pace for the CRSTS programme, we have to do that. And as such, we haven't yet, there's been over 400 objections to the TROs along this corridor, and that has meant that Unfortunately, with the timelines, we haven't yet been able to publish the full summary of all the objections done, because it's a higher volume than was anticipated. So all of this is subject to that TRO report. I think I've seen Jenny and Tim. Well, first of all, I'm going to allow for any questions or any clarifications to Adam. Then we're going to go on to, there's a published amendment. So then we'll, as always, we do questions and just clarifications first. So I'm happy to, if anyone wants to put their hands up to, so Jenny and then Tim.
No, actually, no, interesting.
Just Tim then.
Thank you, Chair. I do think that sounds like a sensible approach. I would particularly have concerns about the idea of a livable neighbourhood being examined in that area if we've blocked off one of the main road, want access into one of the main roads there, because one of the ideas of livable neighbourhoods is to stop rat running and ensure that traffic is using the main roads that were designed for it. So this would seem like a sensible thing to not prejudge the outcomes of what you're looking at in that scenario. It is also, clearly there's a high volume of traffic making that journey, and those vehicles would go somewhere else if you deny this this turn of traffic. Something that I raised in our agenda briefing, but I'll raise it here because we're in a public meeting. It is difficult for us as lay councillors to understand all the ins and outs of benefit realisation and how that kind of thing works. So we are reliant on officers to be doing that work and saying how much benefit each of these changes will make. And we obviously are not trained traffic people, so we have to, we do have to take the work the officers have done on this at face value, which I'm quite willing to do. But I would like to understand more about some of the way those calculations are done. And I don't mean I want to train to be to be the next Adam, but it would be useful, I think, for us as a committee to get more understanding of some of those calculations and the way things are worked out, so that because there are going to be a lot of these things coming our way, I think, in the future.
And actually, we've had a member of the public question some of the financial values of this, and but I think it's safe to say that everything is done through WebTag, so which is the Department for Transport guidance, which does have some anomalies. For example, someone in a car is valued, its time is valued more highly than someone on a bicycle, which maybe seem to be somewhat unfortunate, but that is the rules that we have to work by. I don't know if you want to say anything about that, Adam.
Yeah, it's an established government process that we have to follow. There's debates about whether it produces a fully accurate result. It looks at benefits over a 60-year period, so spending £6 million, 18 million pounds worth of benefits, for example, would give you a cost benefit of 3, but that is over the length of the scheme, which is considered over quite a long time. We have been asked to arrange a general briefing, if you like, for councillors on the business case appraisal process. So we're in the process of figuring out how we're going to do that, and then we will get in touch with the I think it's Matty group to do like an hour's session on business cases, how they work, what the stuff means in basic levels, so you have better understanding of what is contained within, particularly the economic dimension of the business case.
Thanks. If I could just raise one other thing as well. In some of the public forum, especially some of the earlier questions, there is a lot of concern raised that bus lanes are actually of no worth whatsoever, and I think the answers to those questions were excellent answers. And I would say, as somebody who is a regular bus user, without the bus lanes that we already have in this city, it would be carnage at certain times of day getting anywhere on a bus. So, you know, to say that bus lanes are of no value whatsoever, I would certainly back up the answers to those questions.
Thanks, Tim. They're also very valuable for the emergency services. I think I have Jenny and then Nick next.
Oh, okay. So I think my question is another technical one. I'm sorry about this, but so the TRO process has its limits, and I think I would like to understand before voting a little bit more about what those limitations are. So, for example, Mark's raised an idea about like, well, can we put these interventions back in? And I understand that it is too late for that, because that would be that's on a different thing. Okay, good. I was wondering where that was, and I was getting a bit confused. Okay, good. But I don't know. Some of the points, like the right turn ban, and it sounds like you can take that into account. But I think I've seen a lot of TROs where it's like, well, the public don't want this to happen, but we think we figured something out and we can kind of fudge it through the business case. But I think I'm not really sure about some of the higher risk ones. What do you think are the higher risk ones that we wouldn't be able to sort of smooth over if the TRO process goes very negatively from the perspective of the public?
So, I mean, a TRO is not a vote on a measure. It is specifically about raising objections to the measure. So it is designed to say, here, technically and legally, is what we're proposing to do. Do you have issues that you think are a problem because of what we're proposing to do? So, as an example, if you've proposed to put in some double yellow lines or a crossing, and for some reason a garage has not been noticed and that garage opens up onto that crossing or something along those lines, that would be a very valid reason to object to that TRO. People will object to bus lane TROs, band turn TROs, etc. The TRO process is a statutory one that generally comes towards the end of the process. CRSDS is squashing everything up a bit because we've got to move quite quickly. But in general, the consultation engagement processes are where you're getting people's views on the proposals as a whole. The TRO is then a statutory process to check if there are any kind of real specific issues with it. So in general, by the time you get to doing a TRO, you've had that discussion about the point of doing something, and it's, are there technical reasons then that it shouldn't happen? So it's quite unusual that at the TRO process there would be significant changes. They tend to be more minor changes. You will get some very significant TROs, like Bristol Bridge was a very kind of controversial TRO, East Bristol Livable Neighbourhood, for example, as well. And, you know, different processes can be followed. So in general, the approach is that the decision on a TRO is delegated to the Economy of Place Director in discussion with the chair of the committee to sign it off. For more controversial ones, that discussion really has sort of happened before you do that statutory element.
Thanks. I think that makes it clear, and I hope that's helpful for the public as well. And I just wanted to make a quick comment as well, which is relating to, so my ward covers part of the East Bristol Livable Neighbourhood, and it's been really interesting hearing this discussion where it's like we're going to do something to help the buses, and the public are coming saying, oh, it feels like this is going to create rat running. Whereas in the East Bristol Livable Neighbourhood, which will prevent rat running, we haven't done any bus improvements, and everyone's like, how do you expect us to use active travel more because there's no bus lane? So I think it's very interesting from a political sort of process point of view where there's no right order. And I feel like the delivery of this at a similar time to working up a livable neighbourhood, from my perspective, seems like it would be a win-win. It would actually maximise the delivery. So it's good that that South Bristol one is coming forward, and a further south one seems really good as well to me. Thanks.
Yeah, I would just say with East Bristol, there are the bus gates that will prioritise buses through those routes that cars won't be able to use. One of the difficulties we do have is the operation of buses and then the physical infrastructure that we do are very separate things. And you know, we have the task and finish group, which is great, but we don't generally have much money to support the bus services. We have been trying to get additional funding for number 5, which goes through East Bristol, Liverpool neighbourhood, as a kind of mitigation for the changes to make it more frequent. It's a challenge because it all costs money, and that's revenue money rather than capital money, which makes it more difficult. The whole process of CRSTS was very constrained and shortened, and therefore taking that kind of more strategic view has been a bit challenging, but it's something we would certainly prefer to do.
And I do think it's not an entirely satisfactory situation we're in, and but this is a lot like a planning committee actually, in that there's a statutory process, and good practice would be you do the engagement first and then you do the statutory second. There's one particular scheme I was involved with where it was pointed out that the walk from the loading bay to the chemist was going to be too long because there's actually a statutory limit for the delivery of drugs to a chemist. And that was flushed out at the engagement stage rather than the statutory stage. So that's good practice where we can. And so we've done both of those, albeit not a couple of years apart.
Just to clarify one further thing around TROs, once you have done the objection report and effectively said, yeah, we're doing that TRO, sealing it, you have 2 years to enact it. So you don't have to do it straight away. If you want to say, we've done the work, we can ban the right turn, for example, if we want to, we're going to see how it functions. If you choose not to implement it, you don't implement it, if you like.
And I think that's a really big thing that we've announced tonight. Nick, you're probably one of the people that is actually trained. I think Tim said that nobody is trained in this, but I think, Nick, of all the people, you probably have quite a lot of experience in this area.
I do, but I still have questions, process questions, actually. 2 quick ones. Appendix B says there are scheme drawings, but there aren't actually any drawings. Should I have seen drawings by now?
Yeah, they would usually be in the full business case. If they're not, we can provide those.
Okay, so second question then. If there's potential for changes, and obviously there's the response to the TRO process, as you say, who makes the final decision, if not this committee, about whether a scheme goes ahead?
In terms of a TRO, the TRO delegation is to the Director of Economy of Place in conjunction with the Chair of the committee. The committee is signing off the full business case, which sets out the scheme as a whole. It's a bit of a grey area, I guess, if you have one element that is controversial. I guess essentially that's for the chair to take views and decide how to manage that process in that specific event.
And do you see an analogy with a planning committee there, Councillor Plowden? As at a planning committee, you would expect to have plans and have the final say.
I did raise with the committee model working group the scheme of delegations around TROs. I used to be an officer that signed them off. Write a report actually to the director at the time to recommend whether or not to sign them off. In so doing, I would always be very, very cognizant of if the local ward members had objected to any scheme, and make sure that was highlighted to the politician concerned at the time. So that was always taken through a politician. I think my feeling is that if I feel something is sufficiently controversial and difficult, then we will bring it to this committee. I wouldn't want to bring every TRO to this committee. I think that wouldn't be a good use of our time. And in the same way that we have, I think, several thousand planning applications every year in this city, and a handful end up in the committee. That is where I think the community review group, whatever it's called, the committee, We'll be wanting to look at the scheme of delegations around this particular area, but I would hope that we would get the judgment right as to what to bring to this committee and what we feel can be done delegated by a director. David.
I'd like to note that that point was well made by Councillor Weston of the escalation panel this morning about the number of decisions that would have to come back to the committee. Isn't it you, Mark?
I made many good points,
yeah.
But I'm not sure that was one of them.
Oh, right, okay. But the number of decisions that would have to come back to committee if we were to do everything there would mean that we would be constantly virtually in a committee system.
I think it was the chair that said it
As far as I'm concerned, I've seen a number of objection reports, and some of them are very controversial. A lot of them, people may not like something, but it's technically and legally desirable thing to do. I think it's a very difficult, I mean, Don, you've been in the situation yourself, and it's a difficult judgment to get right all the time. I think we have to be absolutely clear this is really a way of working out if there's some sort of technical or legal problem. It's not a referendum by any means. So I remember when we were doing residence parking, we had 600, 900 objections. But the policy, very few of them actually challenged the actual policy or legal grounds. There is a chance that if there's something that does transpire, you can do another mini statutory consultation and write to the sort of maybe a limited number of people directly affected in order to just clarify certain points. So that's something that's been done in the past as well. Don, did you want to say something?
East Bristol livable neighbourhood, certainly we adopted a bundling of the objections into subject headings like that, so as to accommodate the number of comments. I think it's the working committee, whatever it is, will need to think hard about whether this is a process that wishes to open up a project to a second political discussion. I'll leave it
whether
at
it gets to that,
I'll leave it at that.
Whether this particular issue or delegations in general end up at the committee is something that I think there's somebody else is responsible for. So in the meantime, we're going to use our best judgment as to what to bring to this committee.
I'm always happy to have more meetings, but I think there are some things you may end up discussing twice.
Anna.
Just a point of clarification. Yeah, ultimately the committee could decide not to approve the FPC, in which case the scheme wouldn't go ahead. So, you know, committee has that opportunity to decide whether the scheme goes ahead or not. There is still that statutory process to complete.
On which note, I don't see any more hands, so I'm going to move the recommendations in the report, which are to approve the submission of a full business case.
Now we have to do the amendment.
Well, what I do is I move the... we did this about 22 times last time, so I think I know what I'm doing. But so I'm going to move, first of all, the recommendations in the report, which is to approve the submission of the full business case to WECA and authorise the Executive Director of Growth and Regeneration in consultation with the Committee Chair for Transport and the Section 1.1 Officer to take all steps required to accept and spend the grant, to tender and procure the contracts, award the contracts, and please note that there was some sensitive commercial information in Appendix E, which has not been brought forward. So I'm going to ask for so I'm going to move those recommendations. I'm going to ask for someone to second that. Thank you, Rob Bryant. And now I'm expecting an amendment to happen at long last. So I'm looking at Don. You've got your hand up.
I have the amendment here.
Okay.
Would you like me to read it word for word, or would you like me to summarise it? You have it.
It is on the screen, but I think it's always helpful to read it out.
Okay.
I think it'd be helpful to read it out word for word because it's not very large, and let's get it read out word for word. So, Don, over to you.
So this committee approves the submission of a full business case in brackets Appendix A and exempt Appendix E to the West of England Combined Authority WECA, including the closure of Bellevue Road at the junction with A37 Wells Road. This point closure will prevent further injuries to cyclists and motorcyclists until a long-term solution for this junction is brought forward as part of the South Bristol livable neighbourhood project.
Do I have someone to second that? Kat. Thank you. Just about to exactly allow for a debate, so please speak to it.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm seconding this because I see on page 94 it says that there have been reports, this is the Atkins report, of cars blocking buses as they encroach into the bus lane waiting to join inbound traffic. So I think there's an issue about the bus lane being restricted. Then there's the issue about the BCR, which I think must be benefit cost ratio. I'm not too sure, but and again, I'm not an expert on that one, but I did notice that it came out bang on 2, which included the Bellevue Road, I assume. So if we take Bellevue Road out, am I right in thinking that will actually be a lower number? And that means that we're looking at something that might be in the sort of low to medium cost benefit, and we're going to ask WECA to spend up to £6 million on that one. Also, we've got the CRSTS money available now, so why not just get on with it and use that money rather than the livable neighbourhood money that may come from a different pot, I guess. Correct me if I'm wrong later on, but I'm not over familiar with these sort of things. But and then there's finally the page 68 to 70, which shows accidents around Bellevue Road. So this is an accident hotspot. We do have flared entrances and exits, issue with increasing the time pedestrians spend crossing the road. And of course we did have the Vision Zero motion come to council last year, and I think somebody actually said, why do we have junctions with sweepy arcs on the corners? I don't think they're a million miles away from me at the moment. So fatal accidents cost nearly £3 million at 2026 prices. So we haven't had a fatal accident there yet, but there's always that kind of thing in the back of my mind in terms of the financial aspects. Yeah, and I think we need to look at the safety aspects and some of the things I've just mentioned there and maybe put this back in.
Adam, do you want to answer the technical BCR question in terms of how that might affect the overall BCR?
Yeah, I mean, we'd have to review it. I don't think it would be a huge impact, but the medium band is 1.5 to 2, so it's being classed as medium. It's right at the very top of medium to high. So it will have an impact. Like every scheme we do the FBC. There'll be slight changes that make slight differences to the cost benefit. It's about establishing, is it value for money? I think 2 is the number we generally aim for, but 1.5 is also medium value for money as well. What the impacts would be, I'd have to go through the report in detail and see if it made significant differences to the BCR.
I think we can make the same comment actually about the band right turn on West Ham Lane. It'll have a small, probably a relatively small impact overall.
It could have impacts in different ways. So if you increase congestion, you'll change one thing. If you reduce accidents, you'll change another thing. It's quite a complicated process to get to that number.
Thank you. I recognise some of the comments made by people in the public forum regarding there being accidents in other places along Wells Road. Just to point out that accident data, serious accident data, is publicly available on Bristol Pinpoint by looking at the traffic accident layer, and it is quite clear to see that this particular element does address a very serious point in the road where historically we have had many accidents. I would love it to be addressed more fully down the road in the South Bristol livable neighbourhood, should that be the choice later on in when that is done. But I don't think at the moment it's right to leave it out and allow for a period of possibly 2-3 years when we do know that this will continue to be a very dangerous place for cyclists and for motorcyclists.
one of the concerns I have about the pinpoint data is I don't think there's anything in there after 2019, and there's been some sort of issue with the police data collection, so that is rather out of date at the moment.
That's been a concern during my time as well, but obviously the trend is there, evident, and has probably become worse since then, not better.
Does anyone else? I've got some. I want to talk about this, but I'd like to let other people go first. So Jenny, you're indicating you'd like to speak.
Yeah, sorry. I have a question for Adam. For the last few years, whenever I've put forward my own little area committee idea of a traffic intervention, like, oh, can we have a zebra crossing here or whatever, the response has been, this would actually be better delivered through a livable neighbourhood. And I just wanted to ask, like, is this actually better delivered through the livable neighbourhood, or do you think it's quite likely that the livable neighbourhood would just shut this anyway, or is it just that it's going to, like, this is this likely to do this anyway? Because I sort of think, I know also in the question, Kaz said that this would be funded through a different part, but I think they're both CRSTS funded. The South Bristol Livable Neighbourhood would be the same part. So does it really make a difference in terms of when it will be delivered as well? So that's two questions.
So yes, South Bristol Livable Neighbourhood is part of CRSTS as well. The timeline for delivering South Bristol Livable Neighbourhood would be right up against the March 27 deadline. So delivering it through the Wells Road scheme would deliver it sooner than doing it through the Livable Neighbourhood scheme. The scheme looked at this, found an issue in terms of accents, etc., and proposed a solution to it. You can look at the wider area and say there's different ways of solving various issues. Part of the issue with Bellevue Road is cars cutting through kind of a top-down area and coming out there. Being one of the few engines in as well, you've got people turning left through a bus lane. There's always issues when we have bus lanes with queued traffic of people turning across them. So one of the accidents that was cited was someone, I think, turning right, which is, I think, an illegal movement into Bellevue Road, I think. So it's possible that it comes up with the same conclusion, that closing Bellevue Road is the best solution to that. It may also say closing this road over here would reduce the traffic coming through, so that reduces the danger at the junction. If you know, there's a certain number of routes that can go into certain areas. If you close it off somewhere else, it means less traffic doing it, and that changes the likelihood of an accident as well. We could also do things like put in a raised table across the junction as well.
Okay. Yeah, I suppose it's, in my head, it's kind of like there's got to be a traffic cell on that little bit. Like you can see that it's ordered. There's only 3 roads in. One of them is Bellevue Road. I suppose, or maybe there's that one there. I don't know. Sorry. Yeah, I think what I'm hearing is that it's maybe better to leave it open, but we don't know yet. And you think it would be better to? Do you think it would actually be better to find out through the scoping study in the South Bristol?
I think there's a strong chance, if you do a livable neighbourhood assessment of that area, that one of the options you would look at would be closing Bellevue Road to deliver the aspirations of a livable neighbourhood. When we designed this scheme up, we weren't doing a livable neighbourhood of that area, so it proposed to resolve a specific issue in that location. Honestly, I could look at it either way. You can take it forward now. You can take it forward as part of a livable neighbourhood. Whether you reach the same conclusion, that will be determined as a livable neighbourhood develops.
Mark, Tim and David.
It's interesting to hear you say that it's problems turning left through a bus lane when that's exactly what you're proposing on the A4 and 8 in my ward. But Never mind, I suppose we'll cause that problem. Yeah. No, this is my earlier statement, but I want to talk about this.
I heard him say something different, which is people turning right, an illegal move, which you're not allowed to do.
With my badge, but okay, fair enough. On this one, on this section of it, I get where Councillor Alexander is coming from on it, but I'm not sure I'm with you entirely on it. If you're going to start to close off this section of road, and I looked at the map and I confess, South Bristol is not my bailiwick, so I've been Google Earthing like a trooper trying to chart it down. I'm sure I'd be welcomed. So I've been going down through it, but I think if you're going to start closing off roads and alter the traffic patterns, you kind of do want to do it holistically. And so looking at the community in the area around it, traffic will just flow. It will flow like water. It will find the path of least resistance. So for me, if you're going to close the road off, I would want to see what the impact are to the other junctions are around it. And I don't think that modelling is done. That modelling will be done as part of a livable neighbourhood if you're going to do it. So for this point, I'm not with the amendment because I think it is better addressed from an access point of view.
You were asking for livable neighbourhood in Henbury?
Oh dear God, no. Sorry, was someone surprised by my answer to that? No. On the wider issue, I'm still actually not sold on what is being proposed overall on this. On things like we're talking about the TRO on West Town End. We're trying to get my thoughts in a row on this. Because what we seem to be asking on the, so I'm not with the amendment, but on the substantive bit that we're talking about,
Mark, would it be worth
we can debate.
I'm finally trying to get my mind in order on this, so just give me 1 second, please, Chair. What you're almost asking on the West Town Lane bit is, allow us to continue with the TRO, we're handing you the ammunition, but we promise not to fire it yet, but we could do it at any point. So I'm not with what's being proposed. I'm not taken at the moment, I'm not minded to stop the whole thing. But I'm certainly not with the amendment. Thank you, Chair.
Tim.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I think the point to make is about safety here. And when this was proposed, safety was one of the key points of this. Where the amendment is suggesting that, you know, one accident is too many, and therefore leaving this 2 years before we do preventative work to prevent accidents. A lot could happen in that time. There could be 2-3 accidents, you know, and we, in our Vision Zero, that's 3 too many. But the point is that when the wider piece of work is done, it may be that a better solution comes forward and you can then implement that solution as part of the livable neighbourhood. But in the meantime, we don't think the risk of those accidents is worth it for the benefit of people living in that area having to leave via a different road.
David.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions and then a statement that I'd like to make about the language that we're using here. Realistically, when will these changes actually be delivered on with spades in the ground? And what timescale will the South Bristol livable neighbourhoods changes be delivered in? Please.
So we don't have a detailed programme for construction for South Bristol yet. I would expect with South Bristol it will be sometime in late 2026, early 2027 would be my assumption. With this scheme it would be sooner because obviously we're signing off the FBC, or proposing to sign off the FBC at this point in time, and therefore it could come forward a lot more quickly in 2025 or 2026. I don't have the exact programme of delivery to hand.
I'm going to make a point about that. Is one of the major risks to this committee is the CRSTS programme. Not only being able to actually implement it in time, because I think we're behind where we would like to be, but also the fact it's such a large programme, 300 million. It looks like we're going to be doing a lot of it all at once. So one of the things I've asked officers to do is bring back to this committee a risk around CRSTS, whether we're going to deliver it at all and invest the money in a wise and timely way, but also the impact of so doing on the road network as a whole. So I think it is worth us just reminding ourselves that the CRSTS programme is now having to be delivered at pace if we're going to invest in this city. David, carry on.
Because the previous administration failed to deliver any part of it for 3 years. The other statement I'd like to make is about the language we're actually using here. I've heard the word accident mentioned many times. Accidents do not happen, collisions do, and they are always somebody's fault. Can we start using the word collision instead of accident, please?
I'd like to endorse that. I learned just last week that it was a result of the motor lobby in the 1950s and 60s deliberately changing the words through the media to use the word accident, whereas previously the word crash was used. Crash is always got a cause, accident implies there is no cause. I'd like to say something about this particular amendment, which is on Bellevue Road. I agree with you. If you look at the data alone, there needs to be a treatment here, and safety is absolutely paramount. However, this closure has attracted a lot of concerns locally, and it's right that, I think it's right that it should be considered as part of the South Bristol livable neighbourhood, because I think we need to take the wider view. As we've had pointed out today, there's just 3 entry and exit points for this community. It will be an excellent traffic cell. The concerns I have is at the same time we will be, if this goes ahead, we'll be building a new signalised crossing at one of those exit points, and the other exit point is going to be effective for the next 2 years by the closure of York Road. So I'm very concerned that actually we don't understand the full impacts of what closing this road would do. I'm also personally concerned because anyone coming down Bellevue Road who's then deflected right will be doing effectively a 180 turn round a blind corner into Cambridge Street and then into Oxford Street or Hill Street. And I'm very concerned that actually we haven't really fully assessed the impact of that with cyclists coming down from Cambridge Street. So I think we do need to be concerned. I think we need to take a very wide view of safety as well as in livable neighbourhoods. And quite often, if you do, my experience of road safety is if you do one small intervention, it quite often just pushes the problem a little bit further. So I am very concerned of the impact on that community of how many people will be really find it very difficult to get in and out of that immediate area, not least because of the other interventions happening there. Having said that, I think I agree with you that particularly the flared entrances are not helpful at all and enable people to make that very quickly. So I personally would rather ask officers to look at measures to narrow and make that much more difficult and slow movement rather than complete closure. And that's what I would commit to do today, to take on board the sentiment of the amendment, but not necessarily to agree with it. So that's my very thoughtful and considered approach to this. And personally, having cycled down the Wells Road pretty much for 30 years now, I get more concerned by all the crashes that I see, and I had 3 or 4 near misses myself on the stretch between Luton Road and Knoll Road, which I personally, and I appreciate I'm an experienced cyclist, not necessarily the people that so that may skew my opinion, but my personal lived experience is the greater danger is down that stretch of road, and I'd like to see continuous pavements put in as part of the livable neighbourhood along this entire stretch. So my commitment is to work with officers to see if we can do something to sort of tighten up that junction but not close it altogether. But I can see Don and Kaz both want to speak, so happy to let you do that.
Yes, I mean, all of these things are great. The choice before us today is either to address this problem now, of this extremely dangerous junction, or to discuss it as part of the livable neighbourhood and maybe address it or maybe not address it as part of the livable neighbourhood. Because we don't know that this will actually be a priority for those who engage in the livable neighbourhood discussion. It may or it may not, but this is a chance to do it. And let's be clear, if we reject this amendment, we are turning down that opportunity to address this dangerous junction now for a possible chance to discuss it in the future.
And what I'm saying is I completely agree with you that something needs to happen, but I'm not sure full closure is the answer, and I'm sure there's a way of tightening up this junction and making it safer without full closure. So that's just, you know, so I think I'm agreeing with you about the problem and the need for action, but not necessarily the solution.
I think we all agree that there are problems, but Vision Zero demands that we act.
Okay. Two of the collisions that I've seen on Pinpoint are people illegally turning right as they head southbound. Kaz, you wanted to say something as well?
Thanks, Chair. Just one more thing comes to mind, not just the safety and Vision Zero aspect of this, but also I think there's a report today that we're in really big danger of not meeting the 1.5 degrees C target. In fact, there was reports of maybe even it being as high as 3 degrees C. And jokingly, it may well be that we need more of the ferry solution soon if we're not careful, because we'll be flooded. But my point is, do you think that by closing this junction, in fact, it might make people think about car ownership in that particular region where there's only a limited number of in and outs? In fact, it might encourage people to ditch their cars and tackle the climate emergency.
Well, I think that's the point of the Livable Neighbourhood programme, is to encourage modal shift and people thinking about the way they travel, and that's why I would rather see this tackled holistically rather than in a piecemeal way. I think, unless anyone wants to say anything else, I'd like to move to the vote here. So I'm going to ask, so in favour of the amendment to accept the full business case and close Bellevue Road with immediate or rapid effect, please put your hands up. So that's Tim, Kaz and Don. And people against that, that's Mark, Rob, David, Jenny, Nick and Ed. So now we move to the substantial. I'm sorry, that's 3, 4 and 6 against. I'm now going to move on to the substantive motion, which is to accept the full business case. I've already read it out. It's probably still on the screen. So I'm going to ask for people voting in favour of that. I'm sorry. Oh, you want to speak on it? I'm so sorry. Yes. So let's return to the. We're now debating the substantive motion. So.
Thank you. Sorry, we spent a long time on a small element of it, but we were told at the beginning that our role is to review this full business case for spending £5 to £6 million of public money. Now, this isn't really my part of the city, so, although I did cycle that way a couple of weeks ago just by coincidence, but I am very much reliant on the papers, and the papers is what's being put in front of us to determine. So, firstly, the question, what are the proposals? And having Appendix B missing from that is a real weakness in this paper, in that it doesn't tell us what it's trying to do. I'd also like to know what the consultation feedback is, having heard from people in the public gallery, seeing that there are 25 public statements made, as well as the opposition from the local ward councillors. But Appendix F is also missing. That would be the consultation report, and you've said that there were 400 objections, but that's been offered verbally rather than in the report of the paper. So let's start at the beginning, and what is the problem? And the problem has been identified as twofold, that there are not enough buses using that road and there are not enough cycles using that road. I would say that it's actually up to the bus companies to schedule buses, and the fact that there is only a bus every 2 hours going to Midsummer Norton is the fault of the bus companies.
That's not quite correct, but that's every 2 hours. I don't think that's
Midsummer Norton, you say?
Well, to Midsummer Norton, yeah. But that's
it's
not the
Midsummer
only
Norton,
bus.
but there's plenty of other buses to other destinations.
The 376, I think, is a half-hourly service.
We agreed that there's a bus every 2 hours to Midsummer Norton. Good. Right. And the other issue is there are not enough cycles using that road. And I kind of agree, because it's a really big hill, and there is National Cycle Network Route 3 that runs parallel to it, which is an old railway line and is significantly flatter. So I would, as a cyclist, choose to use the old railway line in preference to the dual carriageway with a big hill. So no matter how attractive you make that road with a big hill on it, there's still a more attractive option right next to it that doesn't have a big hill. So I think that's a difficult objective to try to be working towards. So if we were to install bus lanes, would bus lanes make buses faster? And you need to measure two things there. You measure what the congested time periods are and measure what a free-flowing bus would provide. And we do have that measure of congestion, so we know how long it takes buses to get through the system at peak times. I was surprised to read in the report that we don't actually have a measure of how long it takes to get through the system at the interpeak period. So we don't actually know how fast they could be. There's been an estimate, so this is explained on page 161, that they've multiplied the length of the road by the speed limit that's available and added in some stopping times for each bus stop. But that doesn't actually account for multiple tons of double-decker bus speeding up and slowing down for all 7 of these bus stops, or indeed stopping at the multiple traffic lights. So I think it's not a particularly sound evidence base for the business case. Subsequently, when you get to page 163, you notice that there's also been a time discount applied to the interpeak period. And that interpeak period is the one which has been assumed as the bus travelling at the maximum allowable speed. But it's still going to make another minute saving on that, according to this paper, which is elaborate and very impressive for a big bus going faster than the speed limit in order to achieve the BCR that is accounted for here. So what are the buses that use this route? I agree, there are certainly buses that use the Wells Road, the A37. However, the 2 and the 2A do turn off at West Town Lane, don't they? The CRSTS paper is about the number 2 bus corridor, and the number 2 bus does not go down the section of road for which the bus lanes are proposed. The services that go through, I'm sure they are very useful services for getting into town, but they have come from Midsummer Norton, from Wells and from Taunton, and if we're saying that about a third of them are running late, then possibly it was because of the hour that they spent going through the country lanes that caused delays on the route, rather than getting into this quite fast-flowing section of the road. Moving on then, so I'm not particularly convinced by the analysis here. I am open to convincing by proper analysis, but I am not seeing it in the work that's been provided by our consultant. For the right-hand turn bans, this seemed to be a particularly difficult suggestion for lots of people living locally. The paper says that there's no effect on bus journey times, which is perhaps why it's possible to remove that proposal quite so easily. But I would have expected to see a certain level of traffic modelling about if you take away this movement, then where do those other movements go? So we're talking 1 vehicle per minute at peak times would have to take an alternate route, and we don't have traffic modelling for this proposal, which I think would be appropriate for this level of work. The other proposals in the scheme, pedestrian crossings, fantastic idea. Who wants to oppose pedestrian crossings? If the paper had a road safety audit informing it that actually looked at the locations of all of those collisions, then perhaps there would be an evidence trail behind the decisions of putting a new pedestrian crossing in a specific location. So while we were talking just now about the Bellevue Road junction, the record is 5 accidents over 5 years, quite a lot, but there's an awful lot more in the vicinity, not at that specific junction. So we could actually be guided by the data if the report were produced in a different way. And on the cycle work, again, great idea to connect those 2 sections of NCN3 that have to go on road and around a mini roundabout. That is an awkward one. We could just target trying to make that route better. I would suggest that you take out the gate at the Talbot Road end. There's quite a difficult junction to get a bike through there. So that leaves me with the tricky thing. There are parts of the paper I like, there are parts of the paper I don't like. This happens every single time. Our job here is to choose. And I did say in our last meeting that when we have one of these papers, we get given full business case and it's on either yes or no. And so we can't put in amendments at this stage. And I'm not convinced that we can put in little notes to say, well, we'll authorise the project, but maybe take a view on it later, but the committee will never know. So it's hard to back a scheme that doesn't have plans, the numbers don't add up, and is opposed by all of the local members that we've heard from.
Thank you, Nick. One thing I would say about pedestrian crossings is you cannot judge the number of people who need a pedestrian, who need a bridge by the number of people who are going to swim across the river. So the absence of pedestrian crossings in these places, I think, doesn't necessarily. I don't think we should be looking at casualty statistics or collision statistics. I think we need to be trying to, whenever we're retrofitting any signalised junction, we should be making improving the amenity for pedestrians, and I think that's part of the response to the climate crisis. Myself, I think you're slightly cherry-picking your figures when you say there's a bus every 2 hours in here when you're only talking about Midsummer Norton, and I think you'll find that the buses travel along A roads, not quite country lanes. So, and yeah, well, that's why just focusing on Midsummer Norton I don't think is helpful. I think any big hill for cyclists also goes downhill, and so I think it's worth reminding ourselves, Red Line Hill notwithstanding, that hill isn't always a barrier because it only works in one direction. So that's I'd just like to sort of comment on a couple of those points you've made there, but maybe not some of the more technical ones. Does anyone else want to say anything about this? Tim and Kaz.
I'm just wondering if officers got any response to the criticisms of the data in the report and the feeling that there should be more.
I mean, the full business case goes through the Combined Authorities Grant Assurance process, which is a thorough review by a different consultancy. Although I think in this case they're both Atkins, aren't they? But it'll be a different part of that consultancy that will do a thorough review of it along with the Combined Authority. They will scrutinise it, they will say you need to put more information in here, put more information there, etc. There are always a number of assumptions that are made when producing a report like this that looks at data. You have to make assumptions about how things work. In terms of modelling, the only modelling that do what's being suggested would be to use the Wharton model, which is a regional scale model. 1 car a minute be lost in the noise of a model of that size. So, it's a lot to the people that live on that road, but in terms of that model, it's a very tiny amount. And there are lots of other changes that are being proposed as well, like the bus lanes, the pedestrian crossings that impact traffic choices and movements throughout the area. So to run a model like that to say this is causing that, it's not really that feasible with the modelling options that we have. But any business case like this, there are assumptions and there are assumptions that have to be made about the data to give a general picture. A business case does not say this is exactly what's going to happen. It's giving you a general idea of the benefits of that proposal. And we have to use our own engineering judgment and knowledge to say, does that look realistic? Does that look reasonable? Will it be exactly 2? Probably not. I don't know.
Sorry, Adam, can you just clarify that when it goes through the consultancy and WECA, is that something that's happened already before it's come to us?
Yeah. So they'll do that review, we'll respond, and then we'll submit it to them.
And it's a pretty thorough process, and we've had quite a lot of things, I don't know about this particular case, but we've had quite a lot of things where we've had to go back and do further work in order to get through that process. So it's not an easy step to get through. Kaz.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to say briefly, I'm really glad to see this come into committee, and I want to sort of say thank you to Adam and his team for putting all this together, because this has been on the table for quite a long time. I can remember sort of seeing some of the first consultations before 2020, before the pandemic, and the pandemic obviously pushed things back quite a lot. So thank you. And I think there's been some good discussion. I'm quite reassured by the things I've heard about the TROs, for example, addressing some of the issues raised by local ward councillors. And as always, I want to say thank you to the public forum as well for some very good input and some good questions. I'm quite keen on bus lanes myself. I lived on the Gloucester Road when the Showcase bus route came in, and I think they're very beneficial. So I just want to say it's so good to see Mark here today. I know there might be some short-sighted misery for him, but for me it's a good thing to be bringing in. We need to have a discussion at some point about this, Mark. Maybe I'd better put you out of your misery.
Thanks, and certainly bus services are getting more and more marginal, so everything we can do every minute, every couple of minutes really does make a huge difference to the bus operators, and they've been very, very clear with us in our interactions with them in the Task and Finish group. I think we've been going for quite some time now. I'd like to move us to a vote if I can. So just to remind ourselves, this is effectively to sign off the full business case and authorise us to put that in place. I'd like to see a show of hands in favour of doing that. So, oh, sorry, I need Don. You would like to second that? Thank you, Don. Thank you for the procedural reminder. So, can I have a show of hands for in favour of the recommendation? So that's Tim, Don, Kaz, Rob, David, Jenny, Ed. That's 7. And then against? Mark and Nick, that's 2. Got that? We've got that then, hopefully, clerks. So,
Chair, can I request we have a comfort break?
yes, that's exactly what I was going to suggest now. So, and we did, I think we've actually run, we're a bit behind where we hoped to be, but I'm going to suggest a break of 10 minutes, if that's okay. I do want to say that we really have a hard cut-off today of 8 o'clock. So we've got 3 more agenda items to get through.
Line drawn on the pavement where a wheel can go to the line, but over the line it's a fence in particular before the line. So I would actually like you to bottom out pavement parking as well, because it is a big issue in some parts of the city. So I know it's not the only thing, but please don't forget it. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, just as one task and finish chair to another, I would just say that although our deadlines have been incredibly tight, they are extremely useful in focusing the mind. So I would make sure that you set yourself goals of where you want to be by a certain time, because something like this can become very nebulous and just talk around and round things. So my advice would be, yes, set yourself some firm, even if it's chunks at a time, because it's a much bigger topic, but set yourself some self-imposed deadlines.
Kaz, Jenny, was that your hand?
I'm looking forward to being part of this Task and Finish group, and I appreciate what Mark is saying. I was going to say something very similar myself, that the streets of Southfield are very different to those in Southmead, Stockwood and Stoke Bishop. So there's no one size fits all. I think I already said that in the last meeting. For me, the curbside strategy has to link into efforts to improve public transport. We need to get cars off the road, because car ownership has gone up significantly. And that's one of the reasons why we see in so much pavement parking. So I appreciate pavement parking is just a part of this, but as Mark has said, we need to address that as best we can. I think for me, we need to articulate to residents why changes are needed, why we need this strategy. We need to get their buy-in as politicians, for them to retain trust in their council. And we see so many stories in media about opposition to schemes in local media. For example, one I just picked up on, that controversial LTN has eroded trust in politicians. So as politicians, we need to have some good, honest debate about this. And I'm looking forward to the Task Finish group, and I think so. Hopefully, it's going to get some good output.
Thanks, Kaz. I think if Graham Morris was here, he would agree with you. One of his mantras is he may not agree with all the sorts of measures that we put in place for transport in the city, but we need at least a compelling vision that we can share with the public. So at least we can take people with us, at least in what we're trying to achieve, even if they don't agree with the way we go about it. Jenny.
Yeah, I'd like to echo the comments about pavement parking. I know that you just said it's not the most important thing, but I did specifically want to talk about how it affects disabled people. Specifically, one of the issues we've had in the East Bristol livable neighbourhood is that some disabled people are of the opinion that it's going to be too difficult to drive down the very narrow Victorian streets of Easton because there's no space. And then you think, well, there would be space if the pavement were better managed and there was no cars in the way. So the road is perfectly wide enough if it's not covered in cars. So part of the difficulty that the disabled people have is that there's cars in the way, so they can't drive. And it makes it a barrier for us to bring in more livable neighbourhood schemes, and you'll be aware of this in the South Bristol one soon enough, Ed, because these Victorian streets with double-sided parking is really, really challenging. And yeah, I think for my residents, they're constantly talking about, oh, can we have it one way? And the reason they think it should be one way is because there's cars parked on both sides. So yeah, I think this is going to be really positive for my residents, potentially. But I also think there's going to be a lot of concerns. So I'm really glad that Rob is a local to Easton, so he'll know how controversial it is and hopefully manage that well.
I just want to echo that there's some streets where if we did have cars parked on both sides entirely on the carriageway, then no cars would actually be able to drive past. In fact, if you look at the statistics, in 1971 we had 90,000 cars. The population since then has barely changed. We've now got 310,000 cars. That's the problem, is that we've got so many cars, and most of them spend, I think it's 97% of the time, parked or on the curbside. So it would be, or on drives or on all sorts of places. But it's just, storage of cars is a massive problem. Nick, I believe we've found out this evening that you're going to be part of this group. Is that right?
Yes, it's my assumption I speak for the group on transport. I approve of the setup and the objectives of this task and finish group, because road space is a public asset, and currently, I was going to say car drivers, but actually car parkers seem to have the first claim to this asset. But we should actually, as an authority, proactively manage this resource, which is our resource, so that it does deliver on our priorities for movement across the city. And then, because everyone talks about their ward, Henleys would like a residence parking scheme, please. This is an opportunity to get it moving again after some time where residence parking schemes were not delivered.
One of the things I have made provision for, from both task and finish groups, is on the forward plan we will be receiving feedback at every committee meeting. We may not choose to actually provide feedback, may not have made enough progress, but and it may be that interim decisions come out and we may log that as a key decision. So it may be that quite a pent-up demand for residence parking schemes may actually emerge from the task and finish group fairly quickly, and that hopefully deals with some of Tim's concerns about pace as well. Dom?
I hope that trees and sustainable drainage will get a look in on this, because actually that's one of the reasons why I believe livable neighbourhoods are frankly superior to residence parking zones, which are rearranging largely what you've got there already. Whereas certainly in East Bristol livable neighbourhood, one of the primary things really get more greenery, get more sustainable drainage in there, then see what was kind of left, how we manage what was left, plus the buses and everything else. So there are some areas of the city, my area, I don't think anyone wants an RPZ. I'll never get asked for it. So we would like to be included, but we do certainly need more trees. We do certainly need more sustainable drainage. We're very close to the sea.
I mean, I agree, and that's why we're talking about parking curbside. We're not just limiting to this to parking, so I think that's important. I was with some people from the Transport Planning Society recently, and one of the conclusions from that discussion was that managing parking is an essential plank of any decent city transport strategy. So I'm really glad that we're getting on with this. Should we take I'm going to move us to a vote now. I'm not going to read out the entire things, but effectively, can we agree that we set up a parking curbside strategy and leave the key terms of reference to the committee, and we can now, we've got the full complement of members. Would somebody like to second that? Lots of people. Who hasn't gone yet? Kaz, we'll take you a second, and shall we have a vote? Who is in favour of setting up this task and finish group? I think I know we're going to go with this, so that's carried unanimously. I'm not going to read out everyone's names. Shall we move on now to the quarterly performance report? So, as I say, we would really like to be out of the building in about 35 minutes, so if we could be mindful of managing our time well. We've got 2 reports left to consider, and Ben in particular has been sitting here the entire time without saying anything, so thank you for your patience. But first of all, I'm going to move to Felicity Williamson, who's our Strategic Intelligence and Performance Advisor, to briefly introduce and outline the report. I think you can safely assume that everyone's read it, so you may just want to look at particular highlights or exceptions that you want us to think about. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. Just to sort of to open that there will be a period of adjustment with the new administration going forwards in terms of how corporate performance is reported to the committees. But for now, the report you have here is based on the corporate strategy which runs between 2022 and 27, and the annual business plan below that, and it's the contents of the 24-25 business plan relevant to your committee that are in the report. That said, you don't actually have a lot of actions or metrics, and a number of them are annual, so they're not in the Q1 report. So yeah, there's not a huge number of things in there, but in terms of the key points, your actions, you've got 2 that are behind, but they've got quite clear explanations. That one's to do with the YTL Arena transport mitigations, and the date's been put back, so the Section 106 monies haven't been triggered yet, which is why that work hasn't started. And the other one's around mass transit. In terms of your city out, you don't have any priority metrics for this quarter. In terms of your your city outcome measures, we're not measuring those against targets this year, so we're just looking at performance compared to the previous quarter. So one of the areas of concern, the serious injuries and people killed with road traffic incidents, that's, although it's only one higher than the same quarter last year, we know there is a data lag, so we often get data through later in the year, so that's already higher than it was at the same point last year. But on a positive, your bus passenger journeys, there compared to the same point last year, there's been 1 million more for quarter 1, and your park and ride passenger numbers are up by 57,000 compared to quarter 1 last year. So I think that's hopefully some of the key points, and happy to take questions.
And I'm pleased because you tend to get more bus patronage in the winter, so across the full year we may be seeing good news. Adam, did you want to say anything about this as a specialist?
Just on that point, if the growth matches year on year, then our bus numbers will be back to where they were before the pandemic, so we'll be exceeding 2019, which is a big improvement and getting us back to where we need to be in terms of bus patronage.
And I think compares very favourably nationally, where we're not yet back on track, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, we are in the top 10 of bus patronage per head of population for authorities in the country. But yeah, to be back at essentially 100% around local buses is really positive.
The other thing I'm going to note is that I do feel that we need to just make sure that we're measuring the right things, and thank you, Felicity. You mentioned that there will be a period where we can, and I'd like to involve, hopefully not in a back office deal, but just in a fruitful discussion, members of this committee in what we decide is the things we'd like to be measuring over the next 3.5 years or so. Would anyone like to, David, so I've got David, Kaz and Tim.
Yeah, I'd like to speak about BPOM 120, the casualty statistics. This problem has been ongoing for the past 2 years. I remember it coming to GNR several times, and we're not having the data from Avon and Somerset Police. Can I ask that the Chair takes an action to resolve this as soon as possible, because we really do need this data and it to be updated in pinpoint as soon as possible, please.
to say that?
Hi, the team have escalated it to the PCC to try to get pressure applied so that we can have, you know, better data, more up-to-date data. We are very conscious of it. We've discussed it in Transport Clinic various times, and Adam's team has applied pressure to try and get it. Unfortunately, yeah, we can't make the police do it, but we are applying pressure.
That's more or less what my answer was going to be. So I'll take away an action to do my very best, but I can't exactly force the police to do this. I'm not sure the police are involved in the One City Partnership, but I'd certainly, I certainly, they are. No. Right. I mean, we'll use all the channels we possibly can. I personally note that we've got KSI in the One City, and I think that's something where partners could come together well. I think I've got Kaz, Tim, and then Rob. Did you want to say something specific about KSI?
That. So
okay.
Is there not? Are the police subject to like FOI requests and things like that? Is there another way that we can get around that?
I'm told there's a bit of a glitch in their systems, and they're trying to work through the actual data. If we FOI'd it, they probably wouldn't have it because there's a glitch in their systems, and they're trying to fix that, remedy that. It is not a great situation to be in, but I'll take away an action to contact, I guess, the PCC and urge them to do everything in their power to get on with this. So I've got Kaz, I've got Tim. Nick, did you have your hand up? No.
I just wanted to say thanks for the report. It's good to see so many things on track, and I find it really useful. Just one very small point. You say the mass transit project is currently stalled. Just wondered if you could maybe explain to me what's actually stalling it, just for my benefit.
Yeah, so the business case process, when the strategic outline case was taken to WECA committee, at that point in time it wasn't progressed. There has now been some progress, so for the next quarter we'll be updating to say that the business case process is now being restarted.
I think if you look at whatever page it is of the report, it's clear that this covers the first quarter, and I think it was a meeting towards the end of July where the WECA meeting has decided to put back on track some of the appraisal processes. So I think we're slightly suffering that this is quite delayed, and actually it's, we're probably already into the second quarter, and you'll be crunching the numbers for us quite soon. Tim.
Yeah, just very quickly. We get to see these reports as well at Strategy and Resources, and the mass transit one also comes up in the risk register, and I think I raised at the last meeting there that maybe we need to reformulate what that risk is. It's about not being able to move people around the city is going to restrict our growth as a city over the coming years, and rather than specifically looking at the delivery of this mass transit system, we should be talking about the city seizing up because we're not providing a decent enough public transport system would be probably a better way to formalise that risk going forwards. Something may come from that. Councillor Dyer took it away to comment.
I'll take an action. I've already mentioned that I think CRSDS needs to be one of the risks we manage through this committee. I think that's a very well put, and I can see a couple of people on the committee smiling.
Yeah, just to say I met with the risk team today about that very issue, so we're going to redo that risk to probably focus it more around CRSTS, which is our key programme for delivering sustainable transport, but look at like both CRS, so there is CRSTS2 on the horizon, which is the following 5 years, so we can incorporate that to give the longer term issue as well as the shorter term focus that I know you want to look at in terms of the main risk to our delivery at the moment, which is CRSTS1 and how well we're delivering that. So yeah, that will get updated.
Anybody else? Well, thank you, Adam and Felicity, for helping us through that one, and look forward to seeing you, hopefully a little bit more, I don't know what the cycle is, so have a look at the forward plan, but we look forward to seeing you again soon. Oh, okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for helping with us, helping today, and good luck in your new role. Shall we move on to now the So I'm just going to ask the committee to note the report as per the recommendation, and I guess we're also noting the fact that there's some work to do in data collection and thinking about what it is we're actually measuring. So should we move on to agenda item 11, which is the period 5 finance forecast report, and this is based on the revenue and capital budget for 24-25 agreed by full council on the 21st of February. It says here 2023. Is that? Yeah, that should be 2024. That's a typo. Presenting the financial outturns against period 5. So Ben, thank you for looking through all of the proceedings today, and would you like to just sort of introduce and outline the key features of the report and any kind of things that it would be helpful for the committee to learn?
Of course. So evening councillors. So this is, I think, the second financial report that's come to this committee. So I'll just draw up a couple of things that are different from the last one. In the opening section, we've added a bit more material on Section 55 regulations, which I think will be coming to a future committee meeting. We've been able to do a bit more description of what was Section 55. We then have a description of the current position on savings with the red, i.e. undelivered or not forecast to be delivered savings explained. And then we have our risks and opportunities, which is effectively where we are projecting overspends and underspends at the end of this year, 24-25. And then giving a little bit more information on some of the larger forecast overspends and underspends. I would always note that the big factor within the budgets for this committee's remit is that the Clean Air Zone funding, where we drew down around £5 million last year, and we expect to do the same this year. Then there is a short capital summary with the larger variances explained below, and then a new addition, which was strategic SIL summary. So I think we were asked to do this previously, but I think you're perhaps more interested in the local SIL usage, which I think will be coming forward to a future committee.
Thank
you. Take questions.
Thank you, Ben. I think it's worth pointing out that the budget amendment, the proposed way of dealing with that was through CAS, and it's since transpired that that's not actually subsidising free district parking is not a legitimate use of the revenue from the Clean Air Zone. So that's one of the reasons we've got a pressure, and we will have to look at all the options going forward. And on the forward plan, you'll see we're going to be bringing a lot more parking proposals back again. But obviously some of those will be filtered by the Task and Finish group. So parking is a significant part of our budget, and actually means that the transport service is very, very light on its use of the general funding at all. Would anyone like to ask any questions? David and Tim.
Thank you.
Both of you, I think, are on audit as well, are you? So,
I might be. Several audit committees.
So thank you for bringing that extra angle onto it.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to talk about page 222 and one of the tables there, particularly the line about 433 strategic city transport. We had approved budget of 1.774 million, and it got reduced to 1.244 million. So what didn't happen as a result of that?
So you need to look at 433 and 434 together. So what we've done this year is move some budgets into the correct place. So a lot of the recharge and staff budgets have been moved around. So there is a net 500 or so K decrease in line 433. There is then a net about 800K increase in line 434. The other 300K of that is savings that were put into the local and sustainable transport budget that actually had to be disseminated elsewhere in economy of place. So the net change to those two budgets, which are both my budgets, is essentially zero. Money has moved from one to the other, and some has gone largely to planning, I think.
Is that information hidden away in the table on page 224? Or is there an obvious way of saying what bits got transferred?
No, it's not shown there. It's if I give a brief explanation, it's like I had a recharge target under a cost centre over here, and I put that recharge target into the cost centre over here, so they're all in the same place.
Yeah.
But it goes from 434 to 433, which are both my budgets, and I effectively see them as one. It's just it's a bit of a historic anomaly that they're two separate ones, and ideally we'd join them together, but that would be quite a lot of time and effort at this point in time. So
in the future, can we have that more explicitly laid out?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
I would just, can I just add, because I think you've asked similar questions before, haven't you, Councillor, about money going missing between original budget and revised budgets. It is a slight quirk of the committee system. If you were looking at the economy of place budget in which Adam operates, the bottom line would be exactly the same throughout. It's just because the committee cuts it differently, and some of these budgets have moved out of this committee's remit into another. But I can assure you, the economy of place budget remains the same.
And I think it's worth just explaining when the recharge target is basically people project managing our capital projects are able to charge their time against that capital project. So that's where the more activity we're doing in building bus lanes or messing up Brentry or whatever it might be, Councillor Weston, then the more we have income from that recharge on capital expenditure. So.
Yeah, and the rationale for bringing it all together was to have a better overview and a better understanding of it rather than it being distributed among teams, and that's enabled us to then justify the restructure along with additional savings. It's got more staff in, so it's a positive thing overall, and the numbers haven't essentially changed in that way.
I think okay, Tim, and then Nick.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I forgot to ask a question on the last item, but I'm going to cleverly tie it in with this one. Public transport, we've got a variance of 457,000 showing in here, which is an underspend, I think. This is page 226. And the question I was going to ask was whether the increased volumes that we're getting on the Park and Ride, which is a subsidised service, whether that means that we're actually paying less for that than we thought we would be. And I'm wondering if that is part of the expected variance on public transport, but also what else it might be.
So that table is capital, so that's capital projects as well.
Oh, that's capital, so that, okay. So forget the first part of my question then. The second part is, what are we underspending on public transport capital?
It's likely that will be a lot of the CRSTS projects will be in there, so it's likely that some of it has been reprofiled into the following year. So your CRSTS is over 5 years, we profile it into the years we expect to spend it. If that changes, then we'll move some from 1 year to the next year. So I would expect that variance is related to delays on a project, meaning the spend is coming in future years.
Thanks. I'm also looking at the capital table on 226. It seems like we've been fairly lucky that some underspend has managed to offset our emergency spend. Looking at the local transport scheme, so it looks like our spend rate is pretty low, and these are the things that our residents are most aware of. Is there a reason why that line GR17 is not being spent at the rate that we're expecting?
I'd have to check the details. I mean, the forecast is that we would overspend the budget by year end. The local transport team has been significantly under-resourced for the year, and a large part of the restructure was bringing more resource into that team, which is now happening, so we can start getting some of the schemes through and getting some of the spend out the door. I can get an update on that line if you'd like as to why the spend is what it is. Does that help?
One last quick question, Chair, if you don't mind, about that table on page 226. Where does the schemes that are allocated by area committees appear on this? Is there a line for SIL funded projects or Section 106 projects on this?
Well,
The civil funded allocations are in the table below that, on the final table.
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
At the end of the paper, there's a strategic SIL summary. Oh, sorry, you're talking about the local SIL.
Yeah, so
So we're bringing that forward, aren't we? We discussed that, I think, in the chair's briefing today. So I expect that a future committee will be able to present how the local SIL is spent and divided amongst projects.
Because that's one of the things that we're very keen on, to make sure that that money is spent properly and quickly, because that's one of the things our residents really do ask us about.
yeah, so that I would expect that would be in GR17 local transport schemes. That's where it should be.
It's worth noting some of these codes, so like GR17 and PL10, it's not just one project. You know, when you open that up in ABW, there's dozens of projects under there, so they will be under there. But if we gave you an filtered one, it would just go on forever and ever and ever, because especially in transport, there's dozens and dozens and dozens of schemes under each of these.
Could I ask Ben, maybe you could take away an action just to highlight where the local area, what we're asking about is where the local area committee schemes are measured, and if that's in one or probably two budgets, from what we've just heard, it'd be useful just to pull that out. What I've heard today, I've had a briefing today, is that actually one of the big problems is that there's a lot of very small schemes, Tim's there as well, in the area committee things, and contractors just haven't got the appetite to do very small schemes. So we're finding it difficult to that's one of the big blocks. We talked a little bit about batching them together and seeing whether or not if you had a whole number of things in one area, that would make a difference. One of the things that the team is talking about is, rather than doing that by area committee, what would really help is when we've started to define the movement plan, then you can do it within an area of movement, which is easier for both the team and in terms of the highways management, because the arbitrary boundaries of area committees don't really help. Whereas doing that by movement and where the livable neighbourhood sort of template might be, it becomes a lot easier then to manage that, and for the contractors to think about that, doing that in one go. So I think that is something we are looking at. I'm still not sure that some of those contractors are going to be interested in a lot of small schemes, is some of the feedback we're getting, despite the idea of batching. Tim?
Yeah, I want to thank David for asking my traditional question for me on this occasion. But I think Ben, you did say that you're going to try and bring forward a breakdown of the local SIL schemes and how much is allocated to them, because they're not actually part of the budget of the transport department. They are still paid for by SIL, so they wouldn't, I presume they wouldn't actually appear in this anywhere in here. But I think Ben's already said that he was going to bring that forward as a separate report next time.
Let's have a separate report, but we have, Patsy's just told me that this would feature in here, because once the money's allocated, it's put into people's budgets to manage. So it should actually feature in there. Don,
we do get twice yearly reports from communities.
Yeah.
And they're listed in terms of parks, whatever, transport, whatever. In fact, we got one about a month ago, I think. Look at the status of each of the project, they're each numbered, etc., etc. So it's...
About a month ago, Adam had a new manager start. We had a briefing from him today. He's getting a grip of it. One of the things we've asked is it's still broken down in the old area, 6 area committees, and we want it repackaged as 9 area committees. So I think there'll be... seriously, we're getting the area committees going again this December. I think most people have probably got dates in their diary, so that's a bit of a prerogative for him and presumably Ben and Adam to wrestle down to the ground in terms of the new 9 area committees. Tim?
Sorry, yeah, very quickly. Just Adam, because I forgot to ask the question, are we actually paying less for our in subsidy on the park and ride if the numbers are going up, or does it not work like that?
We will do. So I think the park and rides are done as like gross value contracts, so we get the income from them. The more people that use the park and rides, the more income comes in, and therefore the less subsidy has to be paid to operate the service. You know, we're obviously looking to promote park and rides as much as possible so that there is less subsidy paid. Currently a combined authority pay that subsidy, the better we can get those services, and some of the schemes in CRSTS that we're proposing improve those services, like the Portway scheme, the city centre schemes, for example. Reducing delays, etc., will encourage more people to use them, as will a variety of other things like the parking charge changes that have been made, that sort of thing, and that will then reduce the subsidy long term.
So that's a gross cost contract, but the benefit of that goes to the combined authority, not to the unitary authority.
Yeah, which for the last 2 or 3 years has been a good thing, because there's been quite a significant gap in, the combined authority have funded park and ride services to quite a significant amount to keep them operating. They're still very beneficial in terms of cost per passenger journey compared to some other supported bus services, but they are obviously now rebounding, so that subsidy will reduce, and that will reduce the pressure on WECA's levy as a whole across the whole region.
That will benefit us, but I'm interested to know, because it's free to park, whether or not there's some sort of ability to change budgets. But let's not go into that now. That's maybe something I'll take up and we'll maybe bring back in the future. Is there any other questions? Your hand went up for a while, Mark, but it went down again, so thank you. I'm going... Okay, yeah. I'm going to ask the committee to note the report as per the recommendation, and I'm going to declare the meeting closed. I'd like to thank all the officers for their patience and endurance. I'd like to thank all the members of the public, particularly the ones that are still here. And I look forward to seeing you all at our next meeting, or many of you at our next meeting, 5 o'clock on the 5th of December. And boy, we've got a full agenda for that meeting, so I look forward to it.